That has impact on Oregonians, and it's a dereliction of the federal government's duty to protect Americans. Here's what we do know. When that memo went out, today, we have agencies and community partners who cannot access federal funds. The Oregon Health Authority, on a regular basis, logs in to seek reimbursement of Medicaid dollars for the Oregon Health Plan. That system is shut down. We cannot seek those reimbursements at this moment. Head Start providers who can log on to get reimbursement for the services they are providing for very low-income children cannot get into the payment management system to get reimbursed. The Department of Early Learning and Child Care cannot get into the system that allows them to seek reimbursement under the Child Care Development Fund. That is what is happening today here in Oregon, and I would guess across the country. My message to Oregonians, for folks who are on the Oregon Health Plan, please continue to seek care. This does not impact you today. This is about how money is coming back to the state to pay for the services that you're using, but do not delay care. Same with folks who are in Head Start, your services will be there. But this is a challenge for us to continue to provide services. When the federal government in real time is not providing reimbursement to the states, it is not upholding its promise that was set by Congress to provide these dollars to the states. It's our understanding those dollars cannot be taken back without an act of Congress, but yet today we cannot seek reimbursement through those systems that should be available for the state of Oregon. And I want to remind everyone that these are Oregonians' federal tax dollars at work. They send money to Washington, D.C. that should come back to them for the services that serve them. And for some systems right now, those dollars are not accessible. Again, my biggest concern at this point is making sure this gets fixed. In the last 24 hours, Washington, D.C. has created a lot of chaos and uncertainty, and I think we all know, whether you are government or business, when you have certainty and stability, you can do the best job possible. Right now, there's a lot of chaos and uncertainty from Washington, D.C. My ask of Washington, D.C. is turn on all those systems right now. We can have longer conversations about all the analysis and other things you're asking us to do, but right now those dollars should be flowing to Oregon through the systems that are available for the reimbursement of services that we are providing to Oregonians. And then lastly, I would just say, I'm going to continue to make sure that whatever we do here in Oregon, I'm upholding our values and our laws and protecting Oregonians for the things that they need. And I need a better response from the federal government. They need to turn those systems back on. Those dollars need to come back to the state. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Attorney General Dan Rayfield for a few remarks, and then we will take a few questions.
Thank you, Governor. And thank you for, we've been incredibly fortunate to live in a state where we have a good partnership with the governor when it comes to protecting all Oregonians, and I feel incredibly fortunate to be here today with such an incredible partner. During the past 24 hours, as you heard, the Trump administration submitted an order threatening billions of federal funds here in this state. And for context, Oregon's budget relies on more than $38 billion of federal funds. And as the governor noted, these are funds for simple things like health care. These are funds for things like child care, domestic violence programs, law enforcement grants in our communities, child support within our own Department of Justice. Again, just like we saw that the Medicaid portals are shut down, here for child support at the Oregon Department of Justice, those portals are also shut down for us to be able to pull down federal funding. The messages that are coming from the Trump administration are just plain confusing, and they're inconsistent. And it's another example of the Trump administration and its attempts to sow division and chaos for a political end. What we're hearing from the White House is not what we're experiencing on the ground. And you heard that just a moment ago, where we're hearing that things aren't going to be impacting Medicaid, but the fact on the ground is that these portals are shut down, preventing us from getting access to these critical funds that are important to all Oregonians for programs that they rely in and day out. Right now, the president has been playing fast and loose, as we saw last week, where a judge ruled against President Trump, against his unconstitutional actions, and he's playing fast and loose with his powers to play politics to advance his political agenda. And this is not a new tactic. For those with a longer memory, going back to Trump's first administration, specifically here within Oregon, he was playing politics with states that have sanctuary laws. And he tried to stop formula funding from burn JAG grants for law enforcement here in this very own state. The Oregon Department of Justice challenged his unconstitutional acts with those funding, and we were successful in the federal court to make sure that these law enforcement grants were actually going to the folks in Oregon that they were intended, and that you cannot play politics with how funding is being done. In 2016, the Oregon Department of Justice was ready and prepared to move forward to protect funding in Oregon. We are also ready and prepared now to continue to fight for Oregonians in this space in partnership with the governor. Currently, we have been working with each and every Democratic Attorney General in this nation, and we are prepared to be filing a lawsuit back east to ensure that this vital funding continues to come into Oregon. And again, I remind you that more than $38 billion of federal funding flow into this state. And we're looking at this as a violation of the spending clause. Congress has the authority to spend, not the president. The Congress can put sideboards that allow the president to do that, but that's not the case for most of these federal funding streams, as wasn't in 2016 for the burn JAG grants. And when you exceed your powers, it is part of our responsibility on behalf of all Oregonians to hold the Trump administration accountable in the deal that they have made to ensure that these programs can be funded. Thank you.
I have time for a couple of questions, sir.
So just to clarify, you are planning to participate in a lawsuit. Is that the one being filed by Letitia James? Do you know what state that's coming in?
So we're going to be filing that back east. We're currently in conversations about which state that it is going to be filed within, and it will, all of the Democratic attorneys general will be, we're actually collaborating and working together to get that filed today because of the Medicaid shutdown.
I have a remote question. Stephen Veneman from KVAL KMTR. How will the freeze, affect wildfires and/or reimbursement for the 2024 wildfire season?
Well, I think this is the challenge for us. We don't know about other funding streams. The federal administration, the Trump administration is saying one thing, and they say, well, these things won't be touched, and yet they said, well, Medicaid won't be touched. Medicaid is being touched today, and the reimbursement portal being shut down. We don't have any understanding about any of the wildfire funding, but honestly, the uncertainty coming out of the administration, they say one thing and then they can't answer questions about what's actually happening on the ground. Here in Oregon, we know what is happening for certain programs. I'm hoping we don't see any other freezes on funding like we're seeing today. They need to turn all those reimbursement systems on so Oregon continues to receive the dollars that Oregonians pay into the system.
Yeah, sure. What, if any, communication have you had from the Trump administration about this, and what should Oregonians who might be on Medicaid or have kids in Head Start, should they change anything moving forward?
The message today for Oregonians is we are monitoring this.
This should be happening. What we have heard from the federal government is they issued a memo with no guidance and they shut off reimbursement mechanisms in response. We don't know what that means. You know, that is inconsistent with what practice has been in the past. If we're going to get guidance and we need to know, we need to have advance notice. There's complete confusion right now from the Trump administration about what they're doing and what it means for Americans across the country.
I have a question, remote question from Claire Rush with the Associated Press. Can you please provide more detail on what it means for Oregonians that the state's Medicaid portal is down and that payments have been affected? Thank you.
So what happens here in the state when you're on the Oregon Health Plan and we have to pay for the services you receive, the state pays for things and then we get reimbursement from the federal government. They do that on a regular basis, multiple times a day. It's like your household budget. If you pay for something and you don't get paid back for the reimbursement you're expecting, or you don't get your paycheck, that will be a cash flow problem at some point. Right now, the uncertainty of saying one thing and then cutting off money, which is not, in our understanding, what a president can do. Those dollars are set by Congress. That is a promise to Oregonians. Those dollars should be flowing to the state.
Governor, do you have any
clear?
We got it. Back here.
Yeah, in regards to another Trump order, Governor, recognizing just two sexes, will that change any LGBTQ protections for Oregonians?
I think any of the messages coming out of the federal government are completely unclear. We have no guidance. Those executive orders are very broad. In often cases, one page. We are getting 1.5-page memos about you must stop all things. I'm not going to do anything until we know exactly what that means.
Do you have clarity on what proportion of our federal budget is grant funding? Like, it's not clear to me what's some other stream, what's grant funding, what proportion of this 38, 39 billion in this current budget actually is potentially affected here.
I don't think we know. I'm always speaking to what we do know today, and I think to have a strong partner in the federal government, they should provide a lot more clarity about what they're talking about. This is taxpayer money that Oregonians are paying. They should know what is happening, and we don't know that right now. I don't know if you want to speak anything more about the...
Yeah, I think the way that you're defining grant funds, when you think about Medicaid as a grant program, right, is one of the larger proportions of our budget. I think that's the way that these things can be defined, and when you shut down the Medicaid portal, how you're determining and defining grant. Right now, that feels incredibly expansive.
Maybe one more question?
Oh, sure, thanks. Hi, I'm Kaylee from Western West. My question is about the session and if we know anything about how this might impact the work that's going on in the legislative session and the budgetary process at this point.
I do think legislators have a lot of questions about what this means, and so do I. I mean, this is literally today, in the last 24 hours, we are seeing funding streams cut off that we are counting on because they haven't been approved by Congress. I think it's going to be very fluid over the next couple years for what the executive would like to do, what Congress approves, and what that means for our budget. And I think it will just be, we'll just have to adapt as we hear more information. But I think legislators and everybody in Oregon should demand clear answers from the federal government so we can plan, whether that's budgetary or frankly for our lives. Because if you are seeking health care or need to get your kid to Head Start, you need to know it's going to be there tomorrow.
All right, I think we're good.
Okay, thanks everybody.